the money in circulation in our country isn't changing, and when it changes, the government prints additional. So the knowledge that there is always money in circulation, but it depends on which direction it's circulating, it depends on what is the economic situation at that time, then tells you money patterns, right? So when we sense, like, we're going to an election year. During election years, we know that business is usually very bad, risk is also very high, and so on and so forth. So what happens is that people start hoarding money, and people start saving, right? People don't expand businesses, people don't take risks in terms of new investment, people don't ship new products as much as they would, because there's a cycle of how money works. But it doesn't mean that money has reduced in the economy. It simply means that the circulation has actually slowed down. So I always say that when you want to continuously follow money trends, is the theory they keep telling you, and you've been saying there's a comeback to it, that for every shilling someone makes in a capitalist society, someone must lose it, and that's just how it works. I teach you something interesting, and I'll do it in a simple way that it's easy to explain what's currently happening and why taxation in African countries is a gimmick. We shouldn't really worry about the government wants to tax. Is anybody asking, out of the taxes raised by the government in 2024, how much of what they targeted to raise did they raise?
Wadau, kabla tuzame kwa conversation leo, niko na a rather unique request. Sasa on Saturday the 6th of June 2026, I've been invited to support a noble cause ya raise funds for payment ya bill ya a young boy anaitwa baby Adrian. Apart from my personal donation, pia I'm donating my services as an MC for the fundraiser ya baby Adrian, and I thought I would appeal to pia the Wadau fraternity. Kama uko able kidogo na something to spare, you can, mnaweza nisindikiza nayo ni show up pale as a representative wa the Wadau fraternity. Adrian ni mtoi wa 4 years old, manzi, a 4-year-old boy, and he has been battling grade 4 glioma, an aggressive brain tumor, and despite enduring 2 brain surgeries, 28 radiotherapy sessions, and countless difficult moments, he has continued to fight with remarkable strength and courage, inspiring even his doctors. Familia yake ilikuwa faced na 5 million in medical expenses, but half of that has already been covered through the support ya general well-wishers, and they're now appealing for solidarity and support to help ease the remaining burden. Every contribution, no matter how small, is a step toward kupatia Adrian another chance at life and hope for the future. So mimi pia nitafinya contribution yangu hapo kidogo, and I'm humbly requesting Wadau fraternity, kama uko able, uko na something you can spare, please rusha hapa kwa details zenye zimewekwa kwa screen. Ukishatuma, please just send a text to the number, sema hii ni ya Wadau, and nitafika ni represent. Many thanks. Tutazama kwa show. Hey Wadau, guess who's back? Ed Thiong'o, manze. Wale wamekuwa kiuliza Ed Thiong'o should be back on the show. Our friend Ed Thiong'o tumemanage kumpata tena, and he's back and right on time. Tutaingia pale kwa finance bill kidogo, but kwa economic ideas ndio I believe tutaanza. Karibu sana.
Asante.
So we can just get right into it. Unasema hii utopia that we imagine, ati equal opportunities, everyone should have money. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. In fact, if you look at economic principles, there's a level of unemployment that is also good for the economy. Yeah?
Kwa hivyo ni uongo. We lie to people when we tell people we can beat unemployment, let's create opportunities. Creating those opportunities, unasema is a bad idea.
It's a bad idea. First, if you look at global, even those countries that are really, really ahead of us, many years ahead of us.
Yes.
There is also still unemployment is still there. They still have debt. They still have poverty like we do.
Yes.
And therefore, the economic system isn't designed to be self-sustaining in a utopic way as Africans imagine we need to. It is not built.
Yes.
It is not built for debt-free living. So because what I was telling you is that anytime you increase productivity in an economy, you are also pushing inflation. And therefore, it is not in the best interest of any economy to have productivity levels that exceed the strategic intention of that particular economy. So take, for example, if all of a sudden, for some reason, everybody has money. Basic commodities like tea, like bus fare, like electricity, like bread, start becoming expensive. And unfortunately, what I told you last time is that for every shilling you make, someone must lose it. And commerce, and you had a comeback to that. You tell me what the comeback was. And the way commerce is designed, because of how capitalism works, the rate at which people accumulate and others lose is not the same. And therefore, when you have an inflationary economy, it means that the ones below start suffering for the increase of productivity. And therefore, most governments are continuously trying to make sure that the level of inflation and productivity is also controlled to make sure that everybody can actually afford essential products.
If I'm getting you correctly, what you're saying is lazy people are also doing their part. As in, too much productivity is not good for the economy.
Yeah. Isn't it why when productivity goes on an all high, what does the government do to interest rates?
They increase the interest rates to mop up the money from the economy. And I would assume this... able to explain here kidogo. Let's first of all define productivity. Like assuming our unemployment was down to, let's say, for example, 8 out of 10 graduates have a well-paying job. Paint for us what that means for the economy. Why is that bad?
So when, say, 80% of the population is earning a decent living,
yes,
for example, it would essentially mean that most of us can actually, and I told you, it's not even about how much they're earning, it's how much credit then they can afford, right? So human beings are wired to get things from the future to enjoy them right now. And that's why it's easier for you to borrow to build than to save to build. Nobody
it's
saves.
Easier or it's better?
It's easier. It's easier. Show me one person who's actually saved 1,000 until they build their dream house.
Others say, ukipata kidogo, and I have someone who told me that they have a house worth 30 million bob, but they've never had a accumulative like 3 million. Imekuwa ni, mimi nikipata 100k na mwaga mchanga. If I get 50k, I pay the fundis. Ivo, kidogo. See, that's more like saving.
And there are exceptions, but how many are able to do that? Assuming we were to do that, the whole economy was to do that. That person who's saving that little money he's getting, his employer isn't saving a little to pay them. So there can't be creation of wealth without credit. Even if you don't take it, someone else is taking it to pay you, right? So if that person doesn't take credit, there's nothing to save, right? So it's trying to circle back and you see that 80% of the economy is performing really well.
Yes.
What automatically happens is that more people can access credit. And because more people can access credit, they start doing dream projects. Buying fancy cars they could not afford. They buy better homes. They set up businesses, and so on and so forth. So if more people now are living an affluent life, what happens to the prices? They start going up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Start going up. And if the prices get to a place where only a few can afford, because again, and this is the thing I was telling you, that it's not possible for us to have the same amount of money. Because for those 80%, 80 graduates out of 10, 8 out of 10 who now have good jobs, for them to, the salary they're making, they're paying someone else to give them something, right? If you sell cars,
yes,
they'll come to you, give them money, and you sell the car to them. Meaning, for every shilling they're making at employment, they're losing it to you for them to have something that they might actually need right now or could not afford if they didn't have credit. And therefore, what happens, as we continuously have a lot more in circulation, the gap between those who are losing more and those who are gaining more keeps on increasing. And for any government, that is usually the biggest cause of unrest. Because when that happens, then the society breaks its social order. Because the gap between those who have and don't have has really increased. And therefore, it is not in the interest of any government
Yes.
for that to happen. And therefore, the government is going to increase interest rates, not just to mop up the cash, because mopping up the cash is actually a very decent word for saying they are making it impossible for more to borrow.
You know, I have a theory, and I'm actually working on a concept to break it down. That for Kenya, inflation is different because we do not attach value to money. For example, the handouts culture has increased money in circulation that cannot be tied to value. Like sawa, ntakuja nichotee mtu thao mbili thao tatu, sindio? But they have not, like, there's nothing they've done. They've just asked for it, right? And I compare that with other places. I saw someone who, it's a movie, I think, where someone comes and gives a beggar money because they have money. Jamaa akasema, no, I don't need your money. Like, they would want to earn that money. So in my head of heads, I was like, if we had 8 out of 10 graduates have a job, right, such that they have earned that money, there's value they have produced to get that money, even how they spend is different. And that's a good thing because the quality of life increases, because that's how Singapore happens, if you ask me.
So there are two sides to that scenario. The first scenario is that money patterns and expenditure are a factor of culture. So more frugal cultures, for example, in the East,
Yes.
actually, their style of using money is very, very different.
Yes.
If you go to the West, specifically the US, there's what you call commoditization, where people buy things that they don't need simply because they have an urge to buy those things.
Yes.
And that's a factor that the
Yes.
economy cannot correct. It's just a factor of socialization and culture.
Yes.
But there's a flip side to what you're saying. People actually make more prudent spending decisions when there's little in the economy.
But then there's a counter to that too, and I'm glad you brought the culture of the East. The Chinese are known to be natural savers, right? And Kenyans, we are struggling to hit 10%, and I'm being very generous with the percentages there. In China, people can save up to 50% of their income or more, right? And by saving this, the government can borrow from the economy. So if 8 out of 10 graduates are employed, it is good. It is bad for the economy if people have the culture of consumerism. But if people have a saving culture, right, it means the government would not need to borrow externally. If people have, like, let's say the infrastructure fund, right, within the economy peke yake, if Kenya has a saving culture up to 50% and people live on this other 50, it would mean that, let's say, for example, hii barabara inatengenezwa, we wouldn't have to borrow money from sijui Exim Bank ama IMF. It can be borrowed locally, and that people would actually multiply their wealth internally from the saving culture. So does that qualify that basi too much employment is also good for the economy, but depending on the culture of people?
So partly true. If you look at countries that are doing well in terms of domestic borrowing, the US, for example, a big part of their debt is owned by the US citizens. The government borrows from the US and so on and so forth, from the country and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But saving culture from a national level is not a factor of just social practices. It's also a factor of economies, not economies of scale, factors of production and who owns and how they are controlled. In the East, most land is actually owned by the government. Right? So government controls an important factor of production. So you come to African countries, much as they want to save, and they would really, really want to save, the social pressures from cost of living to access to basic infrastructure makes it really, really hard for you to actually end up saving. And by the way, it's not that Kenyans don't want to save. Sometimes it's impossible to save, right?
It's impossible to save.
It becomes impossible to save. If you look, for example, do you know, for example, if in Kenya you're earning $2,000 plus, for example, in other countries you'd actually be amongst the higher level of society.
Even in Kenya, you're actually in the top 5%.
But I
Actually,
surprise you, it still would not be possible for you to save as much as you imagine you would.
$2,000 is tunaelekea around $2,000 tunaelekea around almost 300,000 shillings. Almost 300,000 shillings. Is it net or gross?
Now, let's call it net.
Let's call it net. 300,000 if you live within your means.
But
Why
what
wouldn't
is-
you be able to save?
What is this living within your means? You see, Kings, the way society is structured, and it's not just here.
Yes.
We work hard for better things in life, right? So you say living within your means is a factor of what your means is. And you see, unfortunately, it's just how things are. The more human beings earn, the more they want things from the future, right? So, for example, if you earn 300K, you're unlikely to take your children to a public school where the school fees is free, right? And I keep coming back and saying that saving as a culture is an important conversation, but the more important conversation is actually credit, not saving. What extra income does for you is that it gives you access to credit that others cannot afford, right? So if you look at, for example, countries like the East, that we're using that example, look at the level of credit that the citizens there have. The difference between them and us is that you earn 300K or I earn 100K in China, for example, but the credit access that I have is 4 or 5 times of what you're actually able to get, right? Because credit goes hand in hand with what we're discussing, interest rates and how they're managed, right? So we could intend to be a saving culture, to have a saving culture. And by the Kenyans actually save, anyone who's employed is actually saving in NSSF somehow. People are doing what they can. But you see, what is likely to bring the cost of products down? Is it the factors of production that actually eventually drive consumer behavior are actually not growing as productivity grows?
My count, you've given a very good example. Yeah, if you earn 300,000 shillings, you are unlikely to take your children to a public school. Is this where we get to something that was said on this show with by Dr. Mothomi Thiong'o of citizen responsibility, right? You pay taxes and you are entitled to better quality of service, which means, and I believe this, in fact, I buy this, that what can we call it? Like the public schools in Kenya, if resources were to be managed properly, the public schools should be able to offer the same quality of education as private schools. So if you're earning 300,000 shillings, you're paying taxes well, right? If utilized properly, you do not need to take your kids to private schools.
So it takes us back to what I've just said. That the saving culture is a factor of the factors of production and how they're managed by the country you're in, right?
Yes.
So if education is mismanaged, people are working hard not to use government-sponsored education, healthcare, and so forth.
Yes.
The difference between someone in Kenya and someone in China is that as your salary increases, you're unlikely to unplug yourself from government amenities because they actually work, right? And therefore, if your expenses remain where they were when you are when you are earning 100K, and you're earning 300K, then you have a bigger room for you to start saving, right? But in our country, because of this, the government mismanaging factors of production, and some of these factors of production include things like land. And if you look at where all these things come from, they start from how we manage capital, how we manage land, how we manage labor, all those things. When you put them together, and then you add now a spice of corruption, you'll find that in Africa, we are not working towards saving. We are running away from government-sponsored things because they are tied with inefficiency.
Which means we are living a lie, because however much you run, it will still catch up with you, because if as the incompetence grows, at some point it will not matter how much income you make. So it is actually possible for 8 out of 10 graduates to have money, right? To have employment without messing up with the economy. It all comes back to management of resources.
Not true, but the fundamentals of how the economy work is that the higher the productivity, the higher the inflation. It's across the globe. So it's not to say that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing, because what I was telling you is that the way the debt curve works is that we are continuously growing debt as productivity rises, and therefore as debt grows and productivity rises, what we are unlocking is extra credit. We become more creditworthy. Mm-hmm. To give an example of that person who's now earning a salary, when you get your first job and you're earning say 50K or 30K, the amount of credit you can access from your bank is maybe 10K, for example. So the more you work in the organization you're in, the more you get promoted and you move to 100K, the credit you can access goes to 150K, for example. So the more productive the economy is, the more the citizens of that country can actually access better credit. And what I'm telling you that inflation follows productivity is because the more people are able to access credit, the more products and goods they can actually consume in an economy. The consumption goes up, right? And because prices will go up with this consumption, it is not usually in the benefit, it's not usually aligned to the long-term strategy of the government of controlling inflation, because when you don't control inflation, then what I was telling you that social disorder is likely to happen because of the increasing gap. So I'm not saying that it's a bad thing necessarily for these many people to earn whatever they should earn, but it's just a reality of how economies work across the globe. That inflation is a big consideration for most governments, and inflation is the reason why interest rates are managed up and down. But however, a conversation around what it means for these 80 people to now be able to access these things is a conversation for how much more can they do, not with what they're earning, with the extra credit they've unlocked. We saw it during the Kibaki government. The more credit was available, the more stimulation there was in the economy. People could actually borrow money and do projects at home, and they were working. They would create more employment, and so. And that is actually what you want in an economy. And that is in a scenario whereby productivity and debt are growing at a rate that is commensurate. Not that one is actually growing faster than the other. Because then when there is higher debt than productivity, leads to deflation.
Okay. I'm tempted to say that the more I learn about how money works, the more I'm tempted to actually say that the whole finance system is founded on a lie. I'll give an example. I'm watching a documentary that makes a submission. When Trump comes comes on as president, they block they block immigration, illegal immigration, and they increase deportation. And then an unintended consequence starts to be projected that the American economy may be in trouble because these illegal aliens hold a very, very important part of the economy. All right? They hold a very, very serious in terms of the jobs, what people would call odd jobs, like the survival jobs. And it really is a big contributor to the American economy, and the estimates were around $100 billion annually, okay? So when I look at that, I go back to how are the economies founded? The economies of the imperial governments like Britain, Portugal, and Spain. And when you go into that, you find that slave trade, actually, the banning of slave trade, by banning slave trade, a lot of economies took a dent because of labor as a factor of production. They got free and forced labor. So on the other hand, now when the slavery gets banned, still, you have to pay people for them to work for you. And this is money that you are getting, as in you didn't have to spend.
slaves were part of your property. You had to milk the best out of them.
Correct.
Right? So when these economies are founded on slavery, rudi tena uangalie, by kicking out illegal aliens, the American economy may take a dent. I'm tempted to believe hii kitu yote is founded on a lie yote kabisa.
So there are theories. For example, the theory we've explained is a theory of economic theory called the Marxist theory, where Karl Marx tries to explain how exploitation, how everything we call value in society is based out of exploitation of labor. And he argues the same way and says, if I tell a carpenter to make a seat for me and makes it at 8 shillings or 10 shillings, then I go to the market and sell it for 100 shillings. It is similar to what we've just explained. Much as I'm paying him what he deemed to be his value, the success of my economic structure is factored on exploiting that labor. Right? So, and from a Marxist point of view, it is correcting that imbalance that should be the purpose of the economy and government. Is it? And we have a bit of it in almost all economies, where you have regulated wage. The government is continuously pushing the regulated wage from a certain percent. It's been pushed up to 12% after Labor Day. It tries to address that component of that economic theory, that it is true. And actually, there's a lot of truth to it, is it? That the value someone sees in the work they've done is not necessarily the value that the recipient of that value for retrade actually sees. And without that first person doing the initial work of building that value, then there can't be an economy. And when you go back to transatlantic slave trade, there is essentially the same reasoning. Therefore, economic growth in such a model can be driven by continuously driving the value of labor in every economy. So we go look at why, for example, companies will take their manufacturing to China. Same reason.
Yes.
That the value of exploiting labor in that country is significantly lower than exploiting labor in the US, right? Because the minimum wage in the US is significantly higher than the minimum wage in China, right?
Yes.
So, and the economy built on that model will many times drive on the government continuously regulating wage. So one good example is if you take the example of slave trade and look at what were the impacts of banning slave trade. It wasn't that they could no longer manufacture goods. That was not the issue. The issue was they could still manufacture the same goods, but the value of the labor was significantly higher than it used to be.
Yes, because of the Industrial Revolution.
Correct.
Yes.
And if you're now paying people who are asking for, who are pricing themselves higher than the slaves, then of course the value of exploiting that labor is higher, meaning you have to go to the market at a higher price. Unfortunately, price elasticity will not allow you to go beyond a certain place. And therefore this combination, and the argument is that this combination of balancing labor exploitation versus market prices usually builds an equilibrium that creates economic growth. You get? And that is just one. And there are many economic theories that you can look at. There are guys who will have the classical economic theory, and they argue about the forces of demand and supply being the reason why economy is working, and so on and so forth. But that's an essential one. And that is, it's very essential because it goes back to what we discussed the last time I was here about factors of production, and labor being one of the essential factors of production, and how it's managed influences economic outlook.
Yes.
Yeah?
So how long can we? So now that we've established that, we have the story of the finance bill. The government wants to raise money, and I've told you, Offset, that I feel like we are in a sinking ship. Why? We are milking a cow that has not eaten. We are producing nothing. And I see another documentary about the history, and this was actually very interesting because this guy was making a case that Singapore will collapse very soon. Because of why? Singapore produces nothing. And his explanation was plausible when he juxtaposed that with, I believe, is it Venice or where it's Venice where the Phoenicians were? I think it's Venice, which was a cross trade. It was a trading joint.
It's Venice.
They were not producing anything. They were just brokers, right? And once something comes up to cut out the middleman, you're done. So he said the same of Dubai. He gave the same projection of Venice, and he gave a projected timeline. Unajua, when you say 200 years, 300 years, it sounds like a lot, but he actually makes a case that by the this civilization was wiped out because they are producing nothing. In Kenya, my opinion is, when you look at the so-called factories that we had, we had an oil refinery, sugar tena iko na mambo yake, textile, mitumba, we are importing second-hand clothes, which someone else told me something very interesting, that it's not actually, it's a dumping ground, because sasa where will they take the clothes because of recycling? But we think we are benefiting, okay? Now, we can go on and on in terms of all the industries that have been killed. So we are producing graduates, but we are competing for the same opportunities that were left by the colonial government. In fact, minus the, and I've made this submission in another video, minus the, what do you call it, the Thika Road Superhighway. Thank God tuliekewa hiyo fiber optics, because that's what has enabled the digital economy. Since independence, I dare say that it is arguably accurate to say that the Kenyan government has not had any project that can spur economic growth, any meaningful economic growth. So, tuko na finance bill that seeks to milk money from people. Where is the money coming from?
So I teach you something interesting, and I'll do it in a simple way that it's easy to explain what's currently happening and why taxation in African countries is a gimmick. We shouldn't really worry about the government wants to tax. Is anybody asking, out of the taxes raised by the government in 2024, how much of what they targeted to raise did they raise? So the government have raised increase in taxes, is it? But we go back and ask, were we able to raise the taxes we were supposed to raise?
I would assume no, because the deficit is what we borrow, right?
That's correct. So there is a deficit, and every economy run on a deficit. And I told you why we run on a deficit in every economy is because we are trying to bring forward projects we can't afford right now to spur economic growth, meaning we must work with a deficit for bringing that forward. Maybe we have to borrow, right?
Yes.
But I'm talking about the collection by the Kenya Revenue Authority in terms of targets set based on the tax expansion they do in every finance year. I can't remember the numbers well, but you'll find that there's always a deficit of collection. In fact, a significant poor performance. So, for example, the government is going to increase tax on a certain commodity. If you try audit and ask what economic difference it is making in terms of collection, you realize the government didn't actually collect. But somehow, the government still met its budget performance for that year. And I want to tell you, to explain the way that will be easy for us to, anyone else to perhaps understand. If you're going to take a loan from a bank, and the bank tells you we like to see projections of how you're going to perform next year for us to see whether you're going to make enough money to pay us. Do you prepare those projections with an intention of actualizing them?
You, in this case, you'll be set up to predict the future using past performance, which is usually not a good idea. And this I will subscribe to the ideas of Nassim Taleb. You'd look at your past performance, let's say your past 6 months performance, but this has no bearing with the next 6 months performance.
But with the bank, if the bank is convinced that your projections make sense, if they give you the money you're looking for, is there an incentive for you to go back and follow through the projections?
It depends.
From an economic point of view, from a government point of view,
there is no incentive.
There is no incentive. So therefore, when the government is raising taxes domestically, it is not always because they intend to collect those taxes. It's because also to create fiscal space for borrowing, the government must show economic productivity, right? And that's sometimes, if you look at an infamous tax like the minimum tax, for example, a tax that was saying we are going to tax X% of the losses you make. The government knows very well we cannot, even right now, I've seen some of the proposals, the government knows very well we will not be able to implement this, we cannot implement this. But still, because the financiers want to be shown projections that show economic productivity, then they will roll the red carpet for us to borrow, is it? So we know we are going to finance the economy using debt. And therefore, tax raising in our country, and mostly in Africa, is usually part of the larger scheme for managing fiscal space for borrowing.
Twende pole pole. Twende pole pole. So now, you're saying a document like the finance bill is a script to lie to the IMF.
Absolutely.
As in, this, so it's Kenyans who don't go along. So let me paint a scenario. Like, so should we play along with the government so that they borrow that money, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to finance? Unajua, that's almost what comes up here. Like ati ni kama con men. Just for context, okay? Wale wa M-Pesa, okay? And okay, no, I think that's not a good example. A good example is munataka kugonga mtu, so you collude. So if Kenyans support a bill like that, the government knows. Akia nani, umesema vitu mingi sana, my mind is blowing up. So number one, the government is borrowing. So should we focus on aiding the government to borrow or holding them accountable to what happened last year?
Okay, a good question. So first things first, in the process of doing these gimmicks, for example, for aligning ourselves to show this productivity, in the short term, there are Kenyans who will suffer. For example, anyone whose pay as you earn was increased. If you're an employer, you'd actually be feeling the pain right now. For the last 1 year,
Yes.
we've actually been paying exorbitantly high pay as you earn contributions. We've paid exorbitantly high contributions in SHA.
Yes.
Exorbitantly high in affordable housing levy. So in the short term, we will suffer, right? And why this is unfair is because the government has more than one way to show productivity in the economy. And one of the obvious ways is to cut down on spending. We know we are going to borrow for sure. There is no day Kenya is going to finance its budget using taxes. And that's a fact. So we'll always borrow every year. But we can create additional fiscal space for us to continuously borrow for development by demonstrating prudent use of the money we borrow. And I give an example of what the government is doing, which is totally unfair to Kenyans. I've raised taxes to show that I am going to, 5 years from now, I'll be creating X amount extra dollars for in terms of economic productivity. I might not actually go through to collect it next year and the other year because of enforcement measures, of course, the government doesn't always enforce as it should. But if I happen to get the money from the IMF or the World Bank or whoever else is giving me money, then I have a responsibility to put that money to a productive activity. So that productive activity next year is going to finance part of my deficit, so I don't have to come back to my citizens and raise taxes again.
Yes.
So
yes.
we could play along with this government, and we've been playing along with this government. But now it's going to a place where the government is taking money, instead of putting it to productive use, it's going into odious debt. Then every year, we are borrowing, but we have borrowed money that is we're not able to repay. It's like you going to a bank, telling them, I want you to give me a loan because I want to expand my business. As soon as they give you the money, you go and buy a big TV worth 1 million bob.
Yes.
Now you go and chill in your house.
And time catches up with you.
Time is going to catch up with you. So the next time when payments fall due, you must find alternative means for you to pay it. But what if you took that money and actually placed it in the right place in terms of business? Invested a bit of it. When payments fall due, you don't need to come back to tell your family now, we survive on 1 meal a day because I'm paying the loan that I took with this particular bank. And that is a scenario that the government is actually placing us in. So tax collection, many times, especially in Africa, is never intended to be collected to the last shilling. Because also, the World Bank, the IMF, they're in the business of lending money to African countries. So long as you satisfy, you can actually do something about collections and payment, they're more than happy to give you the money.
You just need to show intention.
Yeah, show productivity,
Not
projected
prove,
productivity.
not prove execution,
When
just
is
show intention.
When is the last time you've seen the IMF coming and saying we want to audit whether... Don't they know of the corruption in African countries? Don't they know that the money that they're giving to these guys many times doesn't even get to the country? They know all these things.
So how I want to ask, how are they benefiting? And number two, I also feel like discussing the finance bill is less relevant than discussing the factor that necessitates a controversial finance bill every year. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So when you go to borrow money, and I want to give you an example of what happened in 2024. That's when we had the Gen Z process, right?
Yes.
So when this government took over power, and last time I remember telling you, they came and said the coffers were empty. So when a government says the coffers are empty, it's because the space to get additional debt has diminished quickly. Meaning that if you go to any lending institute, they tell you actually no, based on the debt you're carrying, based on economic productivity, and based on how these obligations are going to fall due, you do not feel you qualify for the amount of money you're asking for. So the lender of last resort, the IMF, will tell you, we can give you money, but here are the conditions. Condition number one, you must go and figure out raising additional taxes, additional revenue through taxes, through fines and penalties, through excise, through customs, you name it. They would actually have told you, go and now revive your economy by increasing productivity, by having farmers do a bit more agriculture. That's also a solution, right? But because the debt you're asking for is short-term debt, there is no time to wait for you to do those nice things that economic theory provides you to do to spur the economy.
Yes.
So you're forced to do the immediate short-term needs. And that's why short-term needs many times, they come with enhanced taxation. They'll come with prescription of government structure. They'll come with prescription of government expenditure, right? They'll also sometimes will come with prescription of projects. And therefore, when you go to the lender and the lender gives you conditions, and this is your lender of your last resort, you have to oblige. And that's why when the government comes, I doubt that people in government are, for lack of a better word, idiots.
They are not, man.
know.
They are not.
I tell you, Thiong'o, the government has very bright people.
I agree with you.
Extremely bright people. But this guy knows he's placed between a rock and a hard place. I remember, if you don't demonstrate increase in productivity in your country, it won't lend you money. And yet that time, there's a sovereign bond falling due. There is SGR money you're supposed to pay. There's a Dikaron money you're supposed to pay. When this guy comes back, he's forced to take the most unpopular decision for his citizens, which is to tax things like bread. And if you look at the intelligence that the government has, the government of course knows the moment you start taxing things like bread, people will not take it lying low. But still the government still does it. Why? Because the government needs to demonstrate productivity, which is a trap we found ourselves in. And I can't entirely blame the World Bank and the IMFs. If we were taking this money and using it for productive use, then every year, the need for raising taxes significantly reduces over time. And that is what prudent governments have been doing in Africa. Not that they're not borrowing, they're still borrowing. But every year, they're reducing the need to raise taxes because they have put the money in use that actually drives better productivity.
So easy ideas. The more I learn about the money system, the more I find it based on a fallacy. I'll give you an example. There was a time the American economy used to pay farmers not to farm so that they can manage the surplus. What the hell? As in, we have at History Anja, like the government knows. At some point, I interact with stats that says that in Kenya, up to between 40 and 60% of agricultural produce goes to waste. This right here for me looks like a low-hanging fruit. If the government was to harness that, it means we don't have a food problem. We don't have a food problem.
Correct.
Right? but very soon utasikia, very soon there is hunger somewhere in northern Kenya. So as I agree with you that this idea of productivity is managed at a certain level. Then I'm also, again, I also ask myself, sawa, this, but of course, at least that we know where it goes. The country borrows money, it's eaten by a small group of people, and then they invest outside. Like there was a time a Kenyan politician, not a Kenyan politician, a Dubai salesman, real estate salesman, was being awarded for selling units worth $10 million to a Kenyan. Most definitely that's a politician. But then kuna theory ikakuja ikasema ati sawa, you can steal, and I believe this was said by the current treasury CS. You can steal, but please invest back in the country. Is that even an idea that would change anything?
I can tell you, I totally agree with that. I told you. So let me tell you something. I told you here last time, you cannot steal from a poor person. Mtu maskini haibiwi. We already a poor country. Poor that we are running on deficit. We even don't have enough money to pay our military. We have to borrow to pay our own military. So there is nothing that a politician can perhaps steal from Kenya that is significant enough for Kenya to suffer. But this person needs to steal from the future Kenyans. Like the money we are stealing right now, and I told you this last time, we are not going to suffer. The money that we are stealing right now, we are stealing from our children's children, right? Because when you borrow, we have a pay date, which is 20 years from now, is it? So 20 years from now, someone will have to pay that amount of money. The same way we are right now. The money that was stolen by our parents' generations, politicians, is actually what Anglo-leasing, is what we are actually currently paying for, right? And therefore, people steal from future generations. And by that theory makes sense. When you steal and invest in Kenya, the net effect is actually more or less the same as the government borrowing and putting in an infrastructure project, because the money still remains in circulation. It does what it was intended to do. If you read the book called Why Nations Fail, they speak about extractive.
Esmoglu.
Yes. Extractive institutions. Extractive institutions is actually where we steal from the future but don't put money in the circulation of the country we've stolen from. Essentially meaning we're simply writing debt in our books without short-term economic productivity increase, which is why that kind of corruption is the worst form of corruption. Because I'm writing debt on someone, and yet the current people are not using that money to increase productivity. So if you're a politician and you want to steal as much as you can, but come and build apartments, set up businesses at home. It will have the same effect as though the government took that money and came and built a road, because it has actually in the short term spurred economic growth. And by the way, when we talk about corruption, in the history of this country, what do you think was the most corrupt government?
The most corrupt government? I would say, going back in history now, it started in the pre-independence. Like the system has been rotten from the start.
But which government? And I'm asking this because I want to show you just why that theory makes sense. We might say that this current government is the most corrupt government. This government is very corrupt. The previous government was also corrupt. But do you know that the most corrupt government was the Kibaki government?
Don't say Kibaki government.
Do you want to look at the statistics of how much they stole in Anglo-leasing only? 1997, 1990s.
But that's not Kibaki still. That's more towards the end.
The Anglo-leasing scandal continued through. Is it? When did it eventually end?
Yes, it did.
It was across two governments, right?
Yes.
If you look at the level of corruption then, and look at the figures we're talking about in the 1990s, billions in the 90s, that's a lot of money.
Yes.
But still, when we talk about the best economic performance, was around that time, right? Why? Because there was corruption, but there were no extreme extractive institutions in government, where people were not stealing to buy
apartments in Dubai.
And those things, because that does not benefit us. If I steal and build a mall in Kenya, much as I'm a thief, I've actually answered the economic purpose of domestic borrowing indirectly, and I'm not encouraging people to steal. But it's a better scenario than what we have right now, where someone steals and tax the money in the British Virgin Islands somewhere. So we have a debt we are going to pay for, but that money did not benefit the economy even 1 cent. That is the worst form of corruption. And is the reason why in the book they say that is why nations fail. Nations don't fail because of corruption. Nations fail because of extractive institutions.
Nations fail because of extractive institutions. So now the finance bill ndio hiyo imekuja tena 2026, same controversy, same problem, recycling. How do you think this can be reversed, or tuende nayo mpaka isink kabisa mpaka reset?
So first, two things, and it's been discussed enough times. The government needs to start managing expenditure, not even expenditure. The government must spend money for us to make steps ahead, is it? But let the money be put into the use it's borrowed for. Let the money go into the project it's supposed to go into. And that's the first way to put money into good productive use. And I want to use the example of a household, because sometimes I think that it's easy for anyone to understand. If you find that you're in a debt hole in your own home, and you're meeting with your family and you say, how do we get out of this debt? You will do the most obvious things, right? For the first 1 year, you'll tell your kids, no, now we need to move to a different school where I can actually afford. We need to move to a small apartment where I can actually afford. But the debt is still there, right? But you're doing these things fast to create the extra money you are spending on these bills, to put it together so that next month when you're going to pay, you have a bit more to pay without necessarily going into default, right?
Or borrowing more.
Or borrow more, right? But then secondly, if you get a window from your bank and they tell you we can actually extend another 100K or $500,000 for you to be able to try re-engineer your business so you can actually pay this debt, then if that opportunity surfaces, you're likely to put that extra money you've unlocked to more prudent use. Is it? So the current scenario we are in is a factor of the government making the wrong decisions over and over and over and over. So we've already we're in a dark place. We are about to default. We have all these issues. Then we unlock extra funding. But we take this funding, instead of us now putting it into productive use, we now buy the big TV, and then we sit and start enjoying things in 8K. It is exactly the same scenario we're in, and that's why this finance bill will continuously, every year, it will have controversy. Every year, controversy. Because it is trying to now raise taxes from people who in the first place are not benefiting from the borrowing you're doing.
Okay.
You get?
Someone said something, and I thought I thought about it so much. Someone said, when you see someone posts a very good deal on Twitter, ama TikTok, and then people are like, aki pesa wewe. Understand? Then you tie that to another comment, things are hard because people have very nice deals. You may have a good idea in business, but it does not make sense. And however good your deal is, people don't have money to buy. Okay? And other people say that, is this really a good environment to start a business? Because however good your idea is, people don't have the purchasing power. Okay? And when you think about it, unasikia kuna watu wengine wanasema, like, kumbe hapo kwa crisis, that's where the money is. But how, kama the 2008 crisis made people rich. In fact, we had a guest up, the founder of Palm House Diaries. he said that when you see a monopoly fall, there's business there. When you see wakati ati sijui there's a pandemic ngori, there's money there. COVID came, there are people who made millions there. I think that's what you talk about by economic cycles, right? So hii kukosa pesa, is it universal? Or how does one position themselves to always be on the side of money when a crisis is happening? Let's assume that's life, Basi.
And actually, even without assuming, that is just how life is. You've seen something guys do in. I've seen it. People do it a lot. That I owe you 100 bob, I give you. Then I eventually pay.
Yes.
That is how money works. The money in circulation in our country isn't changing, and when it changes, the government prints additional. So the knowledge that there is always money in circulation, but it depends on which direction it's circulating, and depends on what is the economic situation at that time, then tells you money patterns, right? So when we sense, like, we're going to an election year. During election years, we know that business is usually very bad, risk is also very high, and so on and so forth. So what happens is that people start hoarding money, and people start saving, right? People don't expand businesses, people don't take risk in terms of new investment, people don't ship new products as much as they would, because there's a cycle of how money works. But it doesn't mean that money has reduced in the economy. It simply means that the circulation has actually slowed down. So I always say that when you want to continuously follow money trends, is the theory they keep telling you, and you've been saying there's a comeback to it, that for every shilling someone makes in a capitalist society, someone must lose it, and that's just how it works. Every crisis provides an opportunity. In every crisis, there's an opportunity. Why? Because in every crisis, someone is losing money.
Let's address your kitu ya for every shilling one spends, one loses. I believe the accurate counter is, if I sell you this phone, right? If I sell you this phone, I've made, let's say, 100K from selling this phone. But yes, I have made 100K from you, but you have not lost 100K.
I have lost 100K.
You haven't. You have gained something that the perceived value you have of is 100,000. Take a house, for example. If I sell a house for 10 million shillings to you, right? You have given me 10 million shillings, but you have extracted value, the perceived value, because money is all about perception and subjective reality. You have gained value. You would not have spent that 10 million if you do not think what I'm offering you for that 10 million is not worth you spending that million. So it's a trade-off.
No, I get, and that's very different from, we're talking about the movement of currency. Because you see, you can't buy, even if you have a good phone, you can't buy food with a phone. It's not legal tender.
But money itself is a tool of trade of value, right?
Correct. So the movement of money from my pocket to your pocket, we are not going to create additional money for me to pay you, right? Talking about the movement of the legal tender, the store value, because money is a store value.
Yes.
Right? So, and it is actually the only agreed upon store value and legal tender in a country.
Yes.
Meaning, for it to move from one pocket to the other pocket, someone must be losing it for someone else to gain it. Forget about the value that is stored under it in terms of what is exchanged for it. But the truth is, for you to end up with 1 million shillings in your pocket,
it has come
from someone's pocket. You understand? And that is what we should say in capitalism. The cycle of capitalism requires that money moves from one pocket to the other pocket to the other pocket. And it is even so true, even in theft. For you to steal from someone and to become rich through theft, you must steal money from someone. It must leave someone's pocket. But however, your argument in terms of the value exchanged for it is a fundamental reason why money moves. And actually, the exchange of value is actually what triggers movement of money from one pocket to the other pocket. And the conversation as to whether you're getting full value for the 100K or not, we had it last time. And I told you it's information asymmetry. It's just because it's not worth that much. But the truth is that if you set up a business that does not include people losing money for your benefit, then you're not in commerce. Because the value you give for you to be in business must be traded or the legal tender that allows you to afford better credit, and so on and so forth. Right?
Let's go back to the phone example. If I sell you this phone for 100K, right? You have given me 100K. You have only lost, in fact, depends. If I sell it to you for 100K and then you go sell it for 120, by you giving me 100K, you've not lost 100K. You've actually gained 20K on top of your 100K.
In terms of value, right? But in
Money,
in a transaction,
actual money,
no,
in a transaction.
so you're saying that you give me the phone for 100K,
Then you sell it for 120.
I sell the
Right.
phone for 120.
By giving me the 100K, you've not lost it.
So losing in the sense that if we had 100,000 here
Yes.
in cash,
Yes.
and I give it to you,
Yes.
I don't have it, but I have a phone, right? But the 100,000 in terms of cash has actually moved to your pocket, right?
Yes.
And for me to be able to sell it for 120, then 120 has to move from someone else's pocket to come into mine. You understand? So that between you and I in our transaction, we are not going to end up with each 100K in cash.
Understood.
And that is when we say, from economic terms, that the cycle of capitalism requires that.
Understood.
Money moves through exchange for value.
Exactly. That's what I
Correct.
mean.
But the currency, we're talking about the hard cash. You remember, for example, if there are 1 million notes in Kenya and the government is imprinting new notes, there'll still be 1 million notes in Kenya. And they'll keep going round the economy as people exchange it for value.
Yes. Yes.
And because that store of value changes hands when someone gives it to you for exchange of value, and so on, so forth, so until eventually it all comes back to you. That is the example I was showing you. What I was telling you that people do, I owe you 100 bob, I pay you 100 bob, you had someone's 100 bob, then eventually the money goes back to the same person, but that money has actually paid all the debt and settled loan contracts and gone back to the same pocket without us increasing that 1,000 shillings, right? Because that is the essence of capitalism. Value is a perceptive commodity that people sell for the exchange of money. And I told you it's because whatever I want to use a phone for versus where you're selling it, there's a information asymmetry, which is actually what we call value, right? So that theory is the theory of how capitalism works across the globe. Even from an economic point of view, for every foreign exchange Kenya gains, someone must lose it because the dollars in the economy, in the global economy, are finite. They're not as many as we want to get. So for us to be able to get more dollars in, we must get it from someone, is it? We must sell products to them, we must export things to them, and so on and so forth. And therefore, that theory, once you understand it, it shows you the capital cycles. Because those capital cycles are the ones that create progressive inflation. And for example, the example of the phone is that you sold it me for 100 shillings, for the 100,000, for example. Then something happens, then there's an import interruption. Or something happens, then people have a lot of money and the price of a phone starts going up. I end up making more because of inflation. And not because of the money has actually the phone has become more valuable. It's because the circulation has increased and people are now circulating money is more available in the economy, right? So the cycle of capitalism is a fundamental understanding of how economies work and why when you're outside that cycle of capitalism, you actually now start depending on government aid.
Okay. So you've had a chance to look at the Finance Bill 2026. You have also looked at the Finance Bill 2025. Based on what you've discussed, what have you observed in terms of, let's not even project beyond. What do you see from 2025 and 2026?
Well, I'll say one of the things that I've seen that the government has really learned a painful lesson of overtaxation.
Okay.
I've seen the government has been very, very modest in terms of how it has approached this bill in terms of taxation. The government has stayed away completely from taxing consumer products. I've seen that the government has really, really tried to stay from that. If I look at the Finance Bill 2026, there's a lot of emphasis on simplification of tax and enhancement of administrative measures to enhance collection. And what the government has introduced taxes it has actually introduced taxes and taken away some of the long-term taxes to simplify collection. And I think the understanding from what I've seen is that people are understanding it differently, and there could be a bit of misinformation on the finance bill, but truthfully, on some areas of taxation, there's likely to be public outcry, more so around the digital
Streaming platforms.
Digital finance, taxation
cryptocurrency.
of cryptocurrencies, taxation of digital payment gateways, and the rest. That is likely to be fast. The way I've had the CS explaining it versus what is on the act, the interpretation isn't clear. Isn't what the government is saying. If you read the finance bill, it says.
What is the CS saying?
The CS is saying that the taxes being proposed are not going to be passed on to the end user, because they're supposed to be absorbed by the digital platforms.
Does not make sense.
But that doesn't make sense because, of course, when you load up taxes, when you introduce any levy or a tax in business, of course, pricing is going to go up. And I had today questions were being asked. The answers I'm hearing are not quite clear. But if you look at the Finance Act, it actually speaks clearly. The introduction of VAT on some of the payment platforms, again, doesn't reflect the reality of where we are as a country. Because I think at the point we are, we should actually be promoting movement more towards the digital economy and not curtailing it. So if we look at one of the amendments, one of the proposals, especially around that, is to tax the digital finance without necessarily and exempting fully the traditional money transfer methods. So I will actually ask myself, shouldn't the government be encouraging moving towards a more digital economy and rewarding those who actually are supporting this economy? But it seems the finance bill is actually trying to do the reverse, which in my view, I struggle to see where the government is going. But I also think when I try apply the lens we've just discussed of why the government is doing this, it provides for a better projection for economic productivity if it has a digital economy. The numbers must look really good on a spreadsheet.
Which is a very interesting question, because I doubt. Okay, let me give you an example. I would say projectively 10 to 11 million Kenyans have access to YouTube, for example. But what percentage has access to Netflix? Right? If, let's say, 10% of that has access to Netflix. Netflix is a monthly payment platform. I doubt 1 million Kenyans do actively pay for their Netflix subscription every month. I doubt.
I also not very clear, but it seems like it's not possible.
It's not possible. It is not. It is not. And I'm trying to marry this with the consumption of YouTube content as a platform. Most Kenyans consider YouTube to be expensive, right? In fact, I doubt 10 million actively use YouTube daily, maybe monthly. At the same 10 million Kenyans going on YouTube every day, I doubt. So I wonder where the spreadsheets come from.
So if you look, for example, so there's a taxation on the streaming platforms, but there's taxation also on the finance side, which is what I'm talking about, the taxation on the payment gateways, the cryptocurrency. If you have to do the numbers and just you want to introduce VAT on those payments, then automatically you'd actually find that if you have to forecast what that would mean based on the volume of transactions, then it's a huge collection. If you are to get it, if you are to actually be able to do it. Right? If you were to introduce, and I don't know, I'm saying because there are a lot of interpretations as to what this means. If you were to introduce, say, VAT on M-Pesa, for example, the M-Pesa transactions, the convenience fee, it would rack into the millions, right? Actually, almost billions. So with that kind of a number, it's very easy for you to see that this can actually enhance overall collections for that particular reason, right?
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying, that sometimes,
yes.
whereas the government doesn't have the mechanisms to implement this, and of course the government knows very well this will be challenged in court successfully. And sometimes the government knows.
No, the door they are knocking, they are onto something. Now that you introduce the angle of M-Pesa, I think when you look at Kenya, Kenya is an M-Pesa economy. And I think that's the gap they have always wanted to tap into with no avail. And they've been poking kidogo. Poking. And I think that's where they're going. Wata wachana na all the payment gateways. Wachana na the Netflix we are thinking ati unalipa ngapi nini. That's where they are going. I think M-Pesa is it.
If that was to happen, because for us, we try to look at it at the long-term implication of if you are to interpret this law the way they want us to interpret it, and look at the way the bill is drafted, it's also quite vague. Meaning over time, it can be interpreted to mean it will apply across all platforms, for example, and we'll be actually in a situation whereby taxation on things like M-Pesa payments or pay bill numbers or buy goods services can actually then become a thing that the government can actually levy taxes on. But I'll take you back to what I've just told you about why the government does these projections and proposals in the budget. The consumer is not you and I. The consumer is some other guy who's holding funding, ready to give it. So these numbers would actually move the pin for this person to actually make a decision to continue lending, is it?
How does that work, Kwanza? How does it work? If you introduce, let's say, VAT on M-Pesa transactions, does that mean receiving 1,000 bob becomes more expensive or sending 1,000 bob becomes more expensive? Because 10% of 1,000 bob is already 100 bob. If you put it at 16%, that means for 1,000 bob, they already own 160.
So the way I think, and I'm saying this because I've read the bill several and I'm not very clear on the implementation mechanism, which is what actually everybody is asking. Okay, tell us then how you're going to implement it. It's supposed to be VAT on the value addition. The value addition is not actually on the transaction itself. The value addition is the fee payable for use, for example. The number isn't significantly as high as saying it's blanket on the total amount, because the total amount, again, is also not money that M-Pesa has made. There is no value addition and a deposit money in M-Pesa, but the value addition is a service they offer me, and that service can actually become vatable, right? Because the service of remittance of money is actually a value addition, value-added service that M-Pesa is giving me to remit that money, right? So the figure might not be as high as saying it's 16% on the whole 1,000 bob. But whatever that small figure is, if you look at the transaction cost for M-Pesa across every day, look at the numbers they're making, then you put VAT on that, then that's significant. So the argument is that this percentage isn't being levied on the whole amount, it's being levied on the transaction cost, for example. But we know that will be passed on somehow to the person using the service, right? And that is when you try look at the practicality of doing this, it's asking how well does the government intend to achieve this?
Do you know that trick unasema I believe in the 1930s, after the Great Depression of 1929 or somewhere thereabout. Before that, the US citizens, I believe, is it US or UK? I may mix this up. US never used to pay taxes. Ati income tax yani nini. It got introduced. Poor people wakaambiwa, this is to tax the rich. Ini ya matajiri, ini tunataka kuwapin. How this became now an obligation for everyone.
And you see the fundamentals of taxation for those who study tax is that any tax proposed must be simple to understand and to implement. So when we start seeing proposals in a finance bill that introduce taxes that are not simple in terms of how you understand, and I've seen different people, I've seen lawyers, I've seen accountants, I've seen people interpret, but how can we have different interpretation for the same tax and you've not even implemented it? It's going to lead to those things you're saying, that someone will look up one day and say, actually, no, I've looked at this is actually what it means. Then all of us are in a place where we're actually paying taxes for things that we ought not to pay taxes for, right? And then you remember that unless you are unless you're an agent, an M-Pesa agent, most time the users of M-Pesa are actually end users. And the regime of VAT actually only works if you're not an end user. In that I'm able to pass on the cost of VAT to someone else until eventually it reaches the end user.
Okay.
But it's actually casting the net too wide, where there is no actually capability for you to move that value downwards. Yeah.
They're probably testing.
So and by the way, and I've said sometimes the government doesn't intend to collect. It's very short term. It's to show that we can actually, if you look at the economic outlook of our country, we can deliver this number for you.
They are looking to securitize something on M-Pesa, and that will be such a big deal for them. Let me show you something. Some of the notes that have been picked. Kuna digital services, kuna rental tax.
They increased from 7.5% to 10%, right?
Yes.
Initially, monthly rental income tax used to be at 10%. Then because of non-compliance, it was moved to 7.5%. So I don't know why the government is moving it back to 10% without explaining what extra thing are they going to do to enhance collections.
This is technically, to put it as simple as possible, rental to the end user, rental income justifiably increasing by 10% per month.
So it's we call it MRI, monthly rental income tax. It's a final tax. So for anyone who has rentals and they're being used for residential purposes, the government says for every amount you collect, you give us 10% of it.
Per month.
And therefore you do not pay income tax, you do not pay VAT, it's a final tax. If you think about it, it's a very fair regime because it simplifies the management of buildings and residential buildings.
So if you pay, let's say, rent 20K, that means the landlord needs to factor in an extra 10% if this is implemented. So a house that you would pay 20K minus this, you'll need to pay 22,000.
So if the landlord decides to gross up, which I think sometimes it's difficult because the market rate for rentals residential is very hard for you to do that, to pass on the charge. As it is right now, 7.5% of the total amount they're collecting is actually being paid to government. So the increment is that of the 2.5%.
Okay.
So that 2.5% is actually what I'm saying. We had initially come down from it because of the challenges of collections. There was a lot of default because the landlords feel it was a lot. And they remember, it's 10% on the gross amount, meaning you're not allowed to subtract any
Your
expenses.
costs.
So the argument was, okay, you make it a reasonable figure like 7%. We assume that the 3% covers the cost of actually running every unit, for example, which still isn't much.
Okay. We have auto-filling of your tax return using the data that they have, the data that KRA has. Good idea or bad idea?
First, I think anything that touches on data is an extremely bad idea. And I want to go back to evaluating the Data Protection Act that we have. It's still a very, very, very young act. It hasn't been properly implemented. So the controls and measures for data management and data privacy, we don't have proper implementation mechanisms.
See, the data that they have in terms of, like when you make a purchase and you use your PIN number, it means it's registered on their end. So instead of doing that manually, I'm assuming that means it is tabulated in the back end.
So that has been happening. And that's what I'm saying, that all these proposals need to be discussed from a point of what is the extra thing they're asking for. So KRA already has your PIN, has your phone number, has your perhaps ID number, is connected to your e-citizen, right? So what is this extra thing that they're asking for, as it is right now for all businesses? When you're filing VAT, for example, the iTax system auto-populates. There's no entry. We no longer do entries on it. So when I say discussions around data should not be finance bill items, they should be tabled in the right act. Because we need to ask the questions, okay, to what extent will you use that data? Right? So for example, if I buy something in a shop, in a supermarket, and I'm connected to the eTeam system on KRA, for example, what is the data KRA is collecting? Is it collecting what I've purchased? Is it collecting the amount I've spent? Is it collecting my buying patterns? What are they essentially collecting? And that's why the Finance Act, the Finance Bill doesn't give us a chance to discuss these issues of data treatment, right? The other bit is KRA is also sharing our data with third parties. KRA is advised by the World Bank. KRA has consultants from the IMF. KRA has connections with OECD, the Organization for Economic Development, which actually does a lot of international tax frameworks. So when we discuss data management, it's not a tax, it's not a finance bill issue. Because remember that data privacy is actually protected by the Constitution. So you cannot use it, you cannot pass it through a back door. There has to be clarity. For example, I am not obligated to provide any data with anyone. The law says unless I consent to it, right? So when you introduce this, are you giving me a chance to actually consent or not consent?
Yeah.
And therefore, all proposals on access to data for administration purposes need to be taken out of the bill and put in the correct bill, so that now the Data Protection Office becomes responsible for interpreting these and being able to perhaps provide additional safeguards.
Okay. So now, as we wind up, please let Kenyans know what you think it's very important that they know about the Finance Bill 2026. The highlights for you.
I think unlike the previous years where we've argued about the finance bill being overly oppressive, I think it's good for us to read it this time with open eyes. I think the government has really learned from the challenges of 2024. One of them, for example, you look at the proposal around taxation on mobile phones. I think people are reading it halfway and not reading it fully.
What's fully?
Reading it fully is
What's the right interpretation?
The right interpretation is that the tax being proposed is a tax to be implemented at the point of activation. So essentially, it's actually going to increase the ability of importers of mobile phones to import more phones into the country, because right now they were actually paying taxes.
For
almost
each handset.
almost 56% of the value of the phone is paid at the point of entry. So you pay import duty, you pay VAT, you pay railway levy, you pay there are quite a number of taxes.
56%.
56%. So if I'm going to import a phone for 100,000, before I even do anything, that figure becomes 156K.
Yes.
Meaning when I land the phone in my shop, I'm landing it at 156K. Now I start
You add
putting a
your
margin.
margin, yes.
So in the new proposal, I'll be able to import my phones at 100K. They come to my shop, and sit in my shop at a value of 100K. When you come to buy the phone from me, at the point of activation, I will pay 25% excess duty only.
The buyer.
No, the seller.
Yes.
I'll pay 25%, apart from not 55 now, I'm paying 25% excess for activation. So you see, if you look at it that way, there is actually a big advantage in terms of cash flow management, and also that the taxes have been reduced. You understand? So that we actually
In layman's terms, the phone that would have landed at 156 on my phone, I can be able to sell it at 156 at a profit, and I've paid taxes.
Correct. And that's from the tax reduction point of view. The second one is from a point of cash flow management. If I had that phone sitting in my shop in the current regime, I am 55,000 less. Even if I don't sell it and I sit with it for 1 year, I have already lost 55,000, which I paid at the point of shipping, right? But now when I'm sitting it here, I'm sitting with it at a value of 100K until the day Kings comes and buys from me. Meaning I've actually saved the 55K, can actually be plowed back into my business to perhaps import something else and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So it's how we read it. And I'm saying this so that we also should be responsible not to just say everything is bad, so that people read it the correct way. So when he's saying yes or no, we are saying it from the point of proper knowledge.
Okay.
The other tax I think is controversial that I think people need to also understand is the taxation on mitumba. And the government is trying to do the same thing we've done with the monthly rental income tax, where we are paying it at source. We're paying it one-off. It's the same the government is trying to do. To reduce the cost of reconciliation and calculation and accounting, they're saying, what if when you import your mitumba, you pay us tax at the point of import? Then don't pay us income tax. right? It has an advantage and a disadvantage, meaning you're prepaying tax before you make a profit. So that if you buy the commodity and don't make a profit, then you've actually paid tax that for profit you didn't realize. But there's a significant difference in terms of the percentage of tax payable in one of the two regimes.
Okay.
I think the last one, and maybe perhaps an observation that I've made, is we should push back on some of the proposals, especially where the government is trying to tax deemed dividends. So what has been happening is, and I think that's I think in my view that's really, really unfortunate if it goes through, because one of the things that the income tax allows us to do is to engage in tax planning for efficient management of cash flows. So currently, if I make a profit and my strategy is to plow back my profit to my business for growth, then I should be allowed to do that, because anyway, on top of everything else, I've already paid you 30% of your taxes. This is my profit after tax. If I don't want to take a dividend, I should be allowed not to take a dividend and push it back in my business for future growth. But the new proposal that is saying they're going to tax 60% of that will be deemed to be profits. The government deems that 60% of what you want to plow back is already dividends payable to you and charge you 15% withholding tax. I think is really, really unfortunate.
It's robbery.
It's actually stealing. Stealing from the businesses you've already taxed. You've increased pay as you earn. You've increased SHA. You've increased housing levy. We are paying for licenses. We've already paid you 30% income tax, corporate tax at the end of the year. We've paid you VAT. We've done withholding tax for you. So if we look at you now loading an extra burden on such a business, then that doesn't make a lot of sense.
And the overall idea now is these proposals are to show external lenders that we have room for borrowing, and then that money goes to non-productive ventures, and then next year we look for other areas to press.
Correct.
And the cycle continues.
Correct. And that is why I'm saying that the unfortunate bit is as the government does those gimmicks, someone is going to suffer. If they do that, for example, this year, end of this year, 60% of the profits we made up and above the taxes we've paid will have gone to government.
So what is your verdict?
A few good proposals, extremely bad proposals on data management and taxation of corporate tax, especially deemed corporate tax. I think it's really, really unforgivable if we accept.
Does the good outweigh the bad, or the bad outweigh the good?
No, definitely, because of the last two proposals, especially on data management and secondly on the taxation of deemed profits, the bad outweighs the good. And I tell you why. Once you start taxing corporates, who are the biggest contributors of economic development in our country, you're actually stifling. Everything else fails. We start laying off people because we're not investing back in the business. We reduce pay as you earn. We stop contributing in terms of manufacturing and distribution. So it's such a myopic way of doing taxes. If someone has already paid you their taxes end of year of the profit the company has made, why would you want them to still pay 60% of what they've not distributed to shareholders? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
Yeah. So for me, I think I would actually reject the whole thing so long as we have such kind of proposals.
Whoever proposed that idea must have been looking at circulation, like wafinye watu alafu, they try to coerce people into like your circulation so that people don't hold profits in terms of future projections. They in their head of heads, they're probably looking at a strategy because that people may hold money because next year is an election year. They want to trick people into.
But that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
Sometimes I wonder, what does the government imagine we're taking that money? If a company does not distribute profits, basically in the next year, it is likely to invest that money in growth, right? So what is this thing the government is assuming they're good at doing that companies cannot do with that money? The government cannot plan better than the company. The company knows we want to buy a new machine. It's going to cost us X amount. So we need to withhold dividends for 2 or 3 years to be able to afford that machine. So the government cannot tell us that it knows how to spend that 60% better than us. In any event, once we spend that money in the business, it is still coming back to circulation. So these are just someone who has very little knowledge maybe around business, or is, again, under pressure from our financiers to show something, or they won't get anything. Because I don't see how a reasonable person would actually say that is possible. So you take all the big companies. Just imagine doing 60% of their profit after tax. How much money you're taking from their cash flow statements.
That is robbery.
It's crazy, stealing from these people.
Thanks, Anna Ed, for making time for us. You're Always welcome. A pleasure having conversations with you. Now we hope utakuja tena na tena. Parting shot, something you'd like Kenyans to know.
I think the future of this country is slowly moving towards. I was actually talking somewhere yesterday and said we're actually moving towards labor as a factor of production and more so for exporting. And my view is we should stop insisting on the older ways of economic growth, where we focus on either agriculture. And I'm not saying agriculture is bad, but I'm saying we need to start thinking of creating more labor export opportunities through technology integration, through skilled and semi-skilled labor. Because if you look at the numbers, we have a lot of educated people, but the jobs that they're trying to get in these corporate spaces are too little. So my view is we are likely to move to a place where TVET organizations, TVET universities and the rest are likely to become quite a big force to wrestle in our current economy. And I think it's important also for universities to start rethinking the quality of education, because if labor is what we're going to become known for, then we might want to start doing a bit more than simply talking good English, and to start finding extra things we can do.
Okay.
With the kind of knowledge we have.
Okay. So and I think part of our next conversation, and I hope that happens soon, can we do models on the possible combinations of the labor export as an economic activity and how much impact it would have in the country?
Correct. That would be really nice to engage in.
Asante.